Last February was my first meeting at the Board of Visitors, and we were filling out our nominating forms, and Christy was asking us to be sure to give this our best attention, that they really wanted to ensure the high quality of the nominees. And so I was reflecting and looked up, and across the table was my good friend Ann Cosgrove from Norman. We grew up together in Norman. And we both looked at one another and said,
Eddie Correia. Exactly. I think what we did was we thought back on our days at OU and thought about the students that were active, had a good value system, and those students that had continued to have that and had gone ahead with their professional careers in such a way that really reflected not only good for them, but also good on the university. So that's basically what we saw with Eddie.
People who we knew that had made a clear contribution to the world in terms of social justice and compassion. And the person we both thought of immediately was Eddie, both in terms of knowing him as a classmate from 1966 to 70, but also knowing contributions he made to our national life and international life. And there's very few people that have made the kind of difference in the world that came out of college, and we did, in our view, that Eddie has made. So it was a very easy, automatic, spontaneous notion to nominate Eddie for the award, and both of us were very happy.
I remember him back in the 70s and 80s, Dr. Carlton Berenda. He wrote a little booklet in which he stated that God did not create humankind, that humankind was creating God and God was evolving. Would you speak to that idea?
Well, I think it's fair to say that it's more accurate to say that man created God in his image than God created man in his image. Now, I don't say that in a way to demean God. What I say that, I think it's important that we think about humans being special for a reason other than the fact that God created them to be the most intelligent being on the planet. They are special not because of that. If you go down that road, that gets you into a conflict with evolution, and you have all the intellectual hoops you have to go through to try to reconcile evolution with that idea. Man is special because man has the intelligence to understand or try to understand and contemplate the meaning of his existence. And man is special because he can imagine God, and God can be meaningful in his life. I think the focus on why humans are special in that way gets us a lot farther than the concept that you're special because God created us.
Well, I had many discussions with Carl Berenda, and I can remember his arguing that very point. And one of the things that we were talking about in those days is an old idea that goes back at least to Ludwig Feuerbach, and the idea of projection. That our idea of God is always a projection of our ideal selves. And that, in the essence of Christianity, Feuerbach had laid that out, and that principle has been in play ever since. And I think Carl was bringing it into play there, and there's something to be said for that. But when Paul Tillich was asked a question about this projection, he said, I am not interested in the projection, but in the screen on which it is projected. I thought that was a beautiful image. He had a way of just ending the argument.
I have no problem with the concept of God evolving. I don't know if I believe that, but I tend to think God is a spirit, a transcendent spirit. And so I don't think of spirits evolving. I think of beings evolving. And as they evolve, they understand the spirit which permeates all creation better and better. I think it's always important to remind people in Oklahoma that it is possible to believe in evolution and to believe in God. My students don't even recognize that as an option sometimes.
dangerous thing to do. Yes. I'm interested in this idea of what we inherit from the Western tradition. Maybe it's not so much the idea of God as a dichotomy, meaning between science and religion, between God and matter and so forth. For a time in Western Christianity, we had the idea, now you only have it in the Orthodox Church for the most part, of theosis, of interaction. And then transubstantiation came along, and God and matter and man and heaven and so forth were separated. But if we look at science, maybe we can take a cue here. In the atom, we have the electron and the proton together. Why does God have to be transcendent or personal? Why can't you have both? Why does God have to be changeless or changing? Why can't you have both? I'm not saying I even believe in God. I'm just asking.
Well, let's talk about Jesus for a moment, because we haven't talked about Jesus today. I think, remember when the rabbis asked Jesus to name the most important commandments? And it was kind of like asking a candidate at a political debate, which do you prefer, peace or prosperity? You know, it's a trick question. And Jesus said, well, there are two laws. Love God and love your neighbor. Now, I think those are really two ways of saying the same thing. And so I think that's one way of kind of maybe part of what you're getting at, is break down the dichotomy that has sort of occupied our thinking about God. If God is part of our consciousness that tells us it's the most sacred, highest part of that, our view of life, then we don't have to separate two ideas, love God and love neighbor. They blur together.